Hello and welcome back to impromptu episode of Boys Gone Wild. There is a sickness in the air, hence why I'm wearing a mask. And no, it is not coronavirus. It is male comedians. What are we like? You can't take us bloody anywhere without fucking soliciting nudes. What are we like, the randy deviants? I can't breathe. Yes, I was not meant. This is not the episode that was meant to be released today. It was meant to be the one that's going to probably be released tomorrow. I spent ages editing that one. I was all excited to get it done, and then fucking all this stuff came out of Crystalia. And even though I haven't done an episode in a long time, I just had to talk about it because it seems to be very prevalent to a lot of the themes of Boys Gone Wild. It's prevalent to me as a male comedian and a podcaster. And I don't know, I just wanted to get my thoughts down. So I haven't really planned this, but I just want to get my thoughts down at least soon after it. Because I think this is going to be, I think this is going to be a much bigger news story than people think. I don't think this is just going to be about Crystalia. I think this is really gonna put different. It feels like a lot could come from this that could actually be have quite an effect on the comedy industry. For those of you who don't know who Crystalia is, look him up. You don't remember his face. A lot of you might be doing like Crystalia. Oh, that guy. Oh yeah, I sort of remember that. Wasn't he in the roast of doing it? That's what you're going through now. He's an American comedian, very brash, very cocky, son of a rich film producer, big bro, this kind of man child, and he's been embroiled in a sex scandal, which is quite different to the ones we've seen before. It's not like the Louis C.K. one. It's not like Harvey Weinstein. It's him being basically messaging underage girls, fans, and trying to solicit nudes, and just genuinely have underage sex and abuse his power. I'm just being generally very creepy. Now, Crystalia, I know a lot of people are going to be jumping on the bandwagon to shit on him, so I think it's best if I be very honest about what I thought about Crystalia before all of this. It's weird because he does a podcast called the Congratulations Podcast, which is very similar to this podcast, eerily similar, where he sits down with a microphone and just riffs for an hour. And for a long time, I used to listen to it for a long time. I thought it was pretty great. I thought he was really good at doing the solo podcast. I thought it was silly, thought it was funny. He's just a goofy dude. Absolute fucking bro dude, American fuckboy for sure. But it always felt like he was very aware of that, and it was sort of like a character. So it's kind of funny. Some of his stand-up clips of him just improvising are really funny. But his and I've always thought that. And when he's on other people's podcasts, like Fighter and the Kid, like all the LA comedy podcasts, he's often really funny, just so aggressive, just quite unique in the way he's funny. But his stand-up is like uniquely atrocious. Like his stand-up specials, all of them have been absolute garbage. Especially the last one, he's just done no pain. But kind of garbage in quite an interesting, quite specifically American way.
That's my new shit, is airdropping random photos to strangers. Dude, it's so funny, man. If you have an iPhone, you don't need to have someone's phone number to text them any picture that exists in the world. Hey, Apple, pictures of buttholes exist.
So now this has come out. It's sort of like he's such a, his comedic persona is being a obnoxious fuckboy, and I always felt it was almost too much, but now it's become very clear that it's not an act. So there's a lot of kind of fascinating parts to this story, because he also has been trying to get more into acting, and he was in the Netflix series You, where he played a comedian who was a paedophile who basically drugged and raped underage girls. Like, come on. So he basically played himself. But that speaks of kind of two things. Maybe, was he doing what you felt like maybe Louis C.K. was doing when he always was talking about masturbating and stuff like that? Was he trying to sort of exercise those demons a bit by kind of putting it into art? But he doesn't seem that deep. So, or, which I think is more likely, was he so delusional about what he was doing, I bet he saw absolutely no link between himself and the character he played on You. I haven't even seen the show, but I've watched clips. And I think that's much more likely to be the case. But it raises interesting things, because a lot of the stories have been sending like screenshots of him basically whenever he's in cities on tour, he'll just try and message attractive girls, seemingly trying to see if they're making sure they're around underage. He seems to like them very young, probably because they're vulnerable, and basically trying to have quick sex with them. I think there was a story from someone who worked at a comedy club in America, in like a LA comedy club, who said that Crystalia used to make her go find the hottest girls in the club and bring them backstage, and would like tell her off if they weren't hot enough, and if he opened the door and he didn't think they were hot enough, he'd go, no, and then she'd have to explain why he was being such a dick. Like, just fucking prick. There's stories of him getting nudes off these girls and turning them to memes and showing them other male comedians. So yeah, like, this has all come out now. He hasn't responded as of me recording this, nor have many of his friends, even though some people even come to his defense, which is, I don't know how, but it looks like it's a very tough way out. This doesn't feel like the Louis C.K. one. He doesn't have the comedic skill to sort of turn this around, I don't think. But a lot of the reporting I found, whenever this happens, they always say soliciting nudes. Crystalia solicited nudes from minors. Solicited. I always find it so strange how the word solicited for nudes, as if like a 40-year-old guy going, hey girl, can you fucking show me a picture of your stupid fucking tits? As if that's soliciting. When I think soliciting, I think of sort of like, right, would you, I'm looking to procure a set of nudes from ideally an underage lady. If you wouldn't mind signing here, that would be lovely. If I could solicit some of those nudes, please. It always sounds so like formal and grand, when it was definitely just Crystalia taking a shit and sliding into girls' DMs on Instagram. Hey, nice titties. I'd love to see that bra on my bedroom floor, bitch. Like, it seems very far removed from soliciting anything. One would be much obliged to see a fine visual representation of one's titties. That would be soliciting nudes, in my humble opinion. So yeah, it is interesting, because I've always had an off feeling about the LA comedy scene, and this might be quite niche, but I know some people who watch this are probably quite aware of the LA comedy scene, because the LA comedy scene is sort of leading the way with how to do modern comedy, which is like, they have the best produced podcasts. They have like, all the big comedians in LA have these really well filmed, really well put together podcasts. The podcast how I think podcasts should be done, which is no fucking gimmick like Boys Gone Wild. Just, they're the fucking niche. They sit down, they chat with their friends. It's filmed well. It's put onto YouTube so you can watch it and you can listen to it on Spotify. And they all have one. They all go to each other's and they just try and be funny. It's not like, drunk lesbians solving murders, or it's like it's just them as the comedians. And so that's partly why they've been so big globally, these LA comedians, is because one, they put a lot of stand-up clips online, and two, they put a lot of podcasts. But what's come with that is that they're all like, most of them are fucking it's followed after Joe Rogan's success with his podcast, which obviously has transcended all other podcasts and is kind of in a league of its own. And from there, that success has kind of trickled down into a lot of the other podcasts, and kind of has sort of made the LA comedy scene, because it's such a huge podcast. But the problem is, these guys, the podcasts are so popular, they're making millions of pounds a year. It's sort of like, I don't think comedians have ever been making this much money in that area. So many of them have been making this much money. But they're all, because of the sort of LA comedy style, they're all fucking like idiots, basically. Like Chris D'Elia, Brendan Schwab, Bobby Lee. They're all these like, and they act like they're fucking teenagers. And it is genuinely funny a lot of the time. But they're like 40 years old. Like Chris D'Elia's 40. Brian Callen's 50 years old. I don't fuck knows how old Brendan Schwab is. But they're all these sort of fucking Bert Kreischer. Like they kind of pride themselves on being ignorant fuckheads. And I'm not going to dig shit on them, because I watch it and listen to it. I mean, and I think there's a lot the UK can learn from the way they do. Like, partly what I do in my day job before this fucking coronavirus was me and my friend Mooch was trying to set up a podcast studio for London comics, so we could basically set up a similar thing to they had there. But I feel why this is such a big thing that Chris D'Elia has been caught with these sort of underage girls is because I think that, having watched a lot of these comedians' podcasts, that I think there is going to be a lot more that might come out, is my prediction about men in comedy. Because I've always felt, and I will get onto the UK comedy scene in a sec, but I've always felt, after watching these LA comedy scene with these sort of infantilized men with a ridiculous amount of money, can do whatever the fuck they want, go on stage every night, they kill, they're adored, their egos are huge, encouraged to be irresponsible, basically. I feel there's this sort of hedonism that was just spiraling out of control, and I think the fact that people have come out and said, yeah, Chris D'Elia's always a creep, I think more stuff like that's going to come out, because it feels like that these guys it's such a boys club in LA, and they're so powerful as cultural figures there, that it's a bit morally unchecked. And I don't know, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, and I don't want to shit on other comics, but it's certainly, male comedians, it's now turning into a bit of a stereotype, which, I'm probably going to encounter a lot. People assume, because if any more male comedians come out as being deviants, it's going to be a real thing that we're all just a bunch of fucking deviants, and we sort of are. I think there definitely is. You get a bunch of fucking insecure, fucking boys who couldn't find any sex or when they were growing up, so they became funny, and finally every night girls throw themselves at them, or they'll just. I'm sure that it's encouraged to become a deviant. So I don't think Chris D'Elia is the only one doing it, and I think there should be a real check, because this is different to Lucy Kay, because Lucy Kay was masturbating in a sort of fetish type way in front of his colleagues. It was much more akin to like workplace sexual harassment, more similar to a kind of lesser version of Weinstein. This is, one, it's underage, and two, it's to do with his fan base, which is a different switch in power dynamics to colleagues in comedy. And the way looking at it, it's hard to know whether Chris was doing this because he really got his rocks off on them being young. Was he doing it because they were young and vulnerable and naive? It was easier. Was he being so flippant because he thinks that's what women like, or did that turn him on? Or probably what I think was more likely the case is if you read some of the stories about him, like messaging girls, and within the third message he'd be like, hey, saw you from the stage last night, you're really fit, do you want to come suck me off in my car? Like, so aggressive. I think it's more setting up. He's someone who gigs all over America. He's constantly going from town to town. I think he's just trying to set up a sort of logistical, practical thing where he doesn't really have to engage in these women emotionally. He can just try and set it up so it's as little work from meeting them to getting them into bed. That's sort of what he wants. He wants to just meet different women and have sex with them. It's what I got the impression. Because there was a story as well of a girl who was messaging Chris and he was like, let's meet in a bar. She's like, that's great. And then he messaged saying, actually, can we meet in my hotel bar? And she's like, oh, that's a bit creepy, but okay. Goes to the hotel bar and he goes, actually, do you want to come up to my room? And she goes like, no, I'm not comfortable. And then he stopped responding. So that's just a perfect example of he's tired after shows and he's just like, fuck it, I don't care. I just want to sleep with the... But maybe there's another thing going on. But it is worth looking at. I don't think it's the same in the UK. I genuinely don't. I'm not a woman here, and I know I've heard lots of horror stories about male comedians in the UK, but it's a bit different. I mean, our fuckboys, the male comedian fuckboy stereotype's a bit different here, because in America, Chris D'Elia on stage, he's the biggest fuckboy in the world, and you see these guys who are comedians who are like, fucking yeah, so I fucked. They'll be on stage doing bits like, yeah, so I fucked this chick last night. She was fucking like. You don't get British comedy. You don't get people like that. That's not British people. Don't find it funny fucking bragging about, yeah, so I was fucking, this girl was sucking my dick last night and I was just like, hey, fucking not stop with the teeth, okay? Stop fucking, what, you're fucking chewing a bologna sandwich? What you fucking doing, okay? I thought this was a fucking blowjob. Like, that sort of attitude doesn't really, sell well here. And those are the people who are normally being sexual deviants in America. Here, in my experience, the real fuckboys are like middle class clowns, or like the really cucky sort of like, oh, I'm a little virgin. Like, those are the ones you've got to watch out for, in my experience. Often the more kind of drunk and rowdy club comics are actually a lot more kind of well behaved. It's actually the really insecure, weedy little fucking, tweed wearing, I met a girl once and then I shat myself. Those comics, something that Americans don't find funny that British people love. They seem to be the ones who deceptively will fuck you over. Is my warning to people looking to bang male comedians. And if you watched, this is only going to be relevant to people who watched the Pedo Cuck Stinky episode. Chris D'Elia is a perfect example of a pedo. So honestly, if you haven't seen that episode, either watch it or ignore everything I'm saying here for the next 20 seconds because it really makes no sense. But isn't it interesting, Chris D'Elia, more and more, we're seeing more pedos instead of cuck pedos. Back in the day, it used to be fully cuck pedos. Most pedos who came out would be like weaselly little cuck pedos. But now, Jeffrey Epstein, people like Chris D'Elia, we got more pedos. So it's been an interesting shift that it's a more commonplace for pedos to be pedos. And certainly the fuckboys in America, the American male comedian fuckboys are normally pedos, and the ones here are normally cucks. Once again, if you don't understand that, I completely get it. Just watch the episode with Sam Ely. But I think part of the reason why the British comedy scene is less like that, I think it's generally less hedonistic. I think there's more. It's more closely. It has seemed to be encourage more morals. But also, one of the main reasons why I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem here, I don't think it's going to be as systemic as it will be in maybe LA, is because comedians here in general will fucking broke. No one's making any money. John Brooks, brilliant comedian, won the Edinburgh Comedy Award, which is technically the biggest award in UK comedy. Like, 3 months later, he was tweeting, anybody got any temp jobs? And like, that's no disrespect, but it's just a different level. It's a different game over here, you know. You have to have side jobs for people on TV. It means nothing. If you're on TV in fucking the UK, it doesn't. You lose money going on Mock the Week. You lose money going on Mock the Week. It's true. Like, it's just a different ball game over here. And I think because we're all fucking broke, it's a lot harder to set up a complex ring of underage girls in loads of different cities. I just don't think the male comedians here have the money, you know? So maybe it's not because there's moral superiority. I think we're just there's so much less money in comedy here. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I just hope I fear that there's going to be a backlash on comedians, because it has felt like maybe comedians have been, certainly in America, comedians have been upheld as almost kind of godlike creatures. Certainly because the sense of humour we have over here, standing on a stage doesn't make you better. Often you're trying to make yourself worse than the people in the audience. But in America, you see some of these comedians, they're like preachers, you know. They're like preaching the gospel, and there's a lot of hero worship. And I wonder if more of this comes out, there's going to be a real check of the kind of powers that are being given to comedians. And maybe eventually we'll end up back in our original place, which is lower than prostitutes. Remember that? Remember back in the medieval ages where comedians were basically the same as a prostitute? That's the same sort of societal respect. I think if we carry on being deviants, that's where we're heading to. We're heading back to being lower than prostitutes in the views of society. But also, look, yes, there's deviants. There's going to be a lot of tweets about male comedians and how fucked up. But it's like, what? So music's better, theatre's better, film's better. Like, yes, there's a problem in comedy, but don't get it twisted. You know, any of these, you give it any fucking insecure creative type this sort of validation, of course they're going to be, you know. And there's interesting questions, like obviously what Crystalia did was fuck, but you know, what if are we going to start zoning in on, you know, general relationship immorality? Like bad breakups, cheating, lying, gaslighting, you know, which it's easy to say this is a comedian's thing, but every friend I know does that. Like lots of friends I know in all walks of life do those kind of more specific minor abuses, like emotional abuse in a relationship, both men and women. So it's that's my only fear, is that if a lot more of these come out, they might start scraping the barrel with like, he cheated on this, like, you know, and ruining people's careers over missteps that lots of people do. I guess that's all I have to say on the matter. It's interesting. People are excited this time. It's less sad. Like when Louis C.K. came out, everyone was sad, but weirdly there's this kind of giddy feeling with Crystalia. I think it's because he's such a cocky prick, such a obnoxious twat. The fact that this has come out has filled a lot of people with a lot of satisfaction. Whereas Louis, it was more just kind of sad and pathetic. I mean, his special No Pain. Because I remember listening to his podcast and he was talking about recording this last special, No Pain, and he was saying, I've watched a few, like 2, maybe 3 of his specials, because I'm baffled about how bad at stand-up he is. Because he kills in America. He, like, in the Comedy Store, it's always, he goes on stage and apparently he murders. So he's filled with this cocky confidence because he goes out on stage and kills. And that's the problem, is that I think sometimes if you get used to killing a club, you get in your head that you're a good comedian, but when you put it out online, it becomes your material sort of laid bare. And I remember him talking about on Congratulations podcast about how like he's been proud of all his specials, but he talked to, like, some of them he won't completely happy with. But after recording No Pain, he was like, "This is the best I've ever done. I absolutely murdered it." So confident, and I was interested to see because I've seen him do good stand up on little clips on YouTube. So I was interested to see. I went and watched No Pain, and it was one of the worst specials I've ever seen. It is bafflingly bad, but it shows this sort of ego delusion, and it's really interesting. Sort of the differences between American and UK stand-up, where what Chris does can only work in America. That sort of, well, it can work probably at other places, but it would not work here. That sort of confidence, walking on with his fucking gold chain, his fucking ripped t-shirt, doing a peace sign non-ironically. Like, you cannot do that in the UK and get away with it. But his material is fucking... The premises are just nonsense. It's utter drivel. And he's just very physically very funny and does, like, noises that are kind of funny. But it's just padding out shite material. Like, there's one routine which is basically... The premise is babies be like Gaga.
Adults, we're ready for the world. That's why we go to the mall. We could glance all day long. We're like, that's a guy, got it, move on. But babies don't do that. They're still figuring shit out. You're like the 14th guy they've ever seen in their lives. They're literally thinking some shit like, what, another one? Wait a minute, he's like my dad, but he's not my dad?
You could boil down the actual substance of a routine in that special to babies be like Gaga. Like Child's Play. And a lot of the LA comics are like that. I think it's because they're sort of spoilt with the audiences they have who just tell them they're great constantly. And so they come out with these fucking insanely basic premises. Okay. That's sort of my preliminary thoughts on it. I'm sure things are about to change. I don't know what's going to happen. I think this is going to be bigger than Chris D'Elia, though. So, yeah. That's been Boys Gone Wild. Yeah. See you tomorrow. Got another episode coming out tomorrow. It's good to be back.